Hi. Jupyter education session, and our next speaker is Team Metzler, and he's going to introduce e2xgrader, an add-on for improved grading and teaching with Jupyter Notebooks at scale. Take it away.
Right. Yep. Thank you very much for introducing me, and well, good afternoon. I think I should probably start with the first slide and not the last one. Otherwise, this looks better. Yes. So let me first tell you who we are, and my two colleagues are also sitting up there if you have questions later on. And we're coming from a small or medium-sized University of Applied Science in the Rhine area of Germany, more specifically from the Master of Autonomous Systems, which is a course which is taught in English. It's international, very small classes with a focus on robotics, machine learning, AI, and data science in general. Yeah, my name is Tim Metzler. Over there is Mohamed Vasil, who is responsible for the infrastructure. So he will also present a poster tomorrow if you're interested in that. And our professor, Dr. Paul Plöger. So let me tell you about our experience with Jupyter Notebooks. And as you can see, we started adopting Jupyter Notebooks rather early in 2012. This is when, before my time, my colleagues started to do Jupyter Notebook exams, which was just using a laptop, USB stick, putting it in there, no additional software. All the students solved it. In the end, just submit the USB stick, which was, of course, possible because we had very small classes. So our courses were maybe 20 students, and you can also see here, I mean, it grew from, I don't know if that works. It's probably easier to do it here. Yes. So it grew to like 30 per course, and here it's a bit higher. And all of that was nice. But of course, like scaling that up does not work if you just create your Jupyter Notebook locally and then distribute it to the students. So this is where we are at now. So notice that the y-axis increased to like 500. So these are all single courses which we conduct exams in. Right. So basically, here you can see there was a big spike in participants. And this was when our professor had to take the undergraduate probability theory and statistics class. And he wanted to try this out. So, of course, what we did before was not possible anymore, and we needed to find new solutions. And this is also, on the other hand, we also have a JupyterHub where we have assignments. These are currently our users, so we have like about 1,300 users. Yes, and then let's maybe look into what we did to actually achieve these numbers. And so we started using Nbgrader to actually make this happen, which is a very great tool because you can distribute exams, assignments, you can author them, you have a nice grading pipeline. But the problem is, problems were amplified. So if you have a course with like 20 students and someone breaks the auto-grading process, right, you just fix that, no problem. But if you have a course with 300 students, every week you are surprised with new ways how to break the process. And I mean, students just deleted cells, copied cells, reordered cells. They put their answers, well, anywhere really. They sent us thousands of emails. And we basically always had to fix, like, let's say out of the 300 submissions, like 10 to 30 every week, which was, of course, not feasible. And let's maybe look at the pros and cons, which we found for us, for Nbgrader. So as I said, I mean, which is great. You have a front end for manual grading. You have auto grading. You can give the students feedback. You have some structure because you have like cell types for solutions, grades and tests. And you have this exchange for releasing and submitting, collecting assignments. But the problem is, when you give the notebook to the student just sees a normal notebook, right? They have no idea that this is a solution cell, right? There is no annotation. So they make a lot of mistakes, delete the cells, reorder them. And then another thing which we found was when we wanted to change like tiny things in Nbgrader's grading process, I personally had to understand a lot of the code base, even though I just wanted to change like one very tiny thing. And this is why we basically developed our add-on for our own use cases. And we called this e2xgrader or e2xgrader. Yes, and what you can do there is you have like customizable components, and very importantly, we have extensions that restrict students from changing the structure of the notebook. So no more deleting cells, no more reordering cells. Always like a nice little visual indicator for the students to tell them, okay, here is where actually your solution goes in. Then we found out that we actually needed new cell types. I mean, markdown cells are great, code cells are great. But we also wanted to have like very standard cells like multiple choice cells or maybe diagram cells. And another thing which we wanted to do was have customizable autograders, right? So that we could basically adapt them and to, well, make the system a bit more popular at our university and find new customers, we needed to create a better authoring process. So basically like reusable small tasks, which I will show later. And we basically developed this software in 3 different modes. So you can just in the command line say, okay, please activate student mode. Then all the student extensions are enabled. You don't have to like do it enable this specific server extension, this specific NB extension. And the teacher mode is the same, so all the server extensions are there. So rather easy to use, I would say. But I mean, I'm the developer, so of course I say that. Yeah, then let's dive into, for example, new cell types. So what you see here is we have, for example, just like a very boring single choice cell, which is rendered to the student like this. So it's right in the cell. We achieved this by basically using markdown cells, and we override the render function and store all the interesting information in the metadata of the cell. Another one we have, which I will, if the time permits later on, show as a demo, is this diagram cell, where students can just click this edit diagram button, and then they have like a little editor from diagrams.net, formerly known as Draw.io, where they can just start and edit everything, because, for example, in computer science classes, it's very nice if the students can create UML case diagrams in their exams. And this can also be extended in a way. So we also have an upload cell where students can take like a picture from their webcam and so forth. And then what we also have is, of course, if you have new cell types, you need new types of autograders. And these autograders can be configured just in the Nbgrader config. I mean, if you're not familiar with Nbgrader, it's basically very similar to the Jupyter Notebook config.py. And there's just a dictionary. You can just say, okay, please replace this grader with another one. And for this, you just need to implement a single class with one method, which is basically determine grade, where you get the original cell in there, how many points the cell could be worth, and then you just produce a certain grade, so a certain number of points. You don't have to understand anything about the deeper process. It's just like multiple choice graders, I think like 8 lines of code. And basically, if none of these custom graders is available, then you always fall back to the standard autograder from Nbgrader. Then what we also did is we basically developed like a slightly web component based architecture. So as you can see, the basis of the software is obviously Nbgrader, right? Because this is just an add-on, and then on top we have our software with like the core utilities, and on top of that we run several web components which can be completely configured. So the standard Nbgrader API, then some API functions we need. This is basically the grading front end, which can be customized. And this is our new authoring component, which I will show you later. And you can basically on the fly just switch components by putting them in the Nbgrader config. And you don't have to install anything. You don't have to well, you have to restart your server, but then it's there, right? So you can also rapidly develop it on an existing JupyterHub. And the nice thing is, if you want to change something, you just have to change like this little part and don't need to understand anything below that. And so let's maybe dive a little bit deeper into the authoring component. And the main idea behind this is, I mean, if you have ever taught anything, you don't have like complete exercises. You always have like small questions and tasks and say, okay, I have something that explains to the students like binomial distribution, right? And then you have, I don't know, something else. And in the end, when you create an assignment for them, you don't want to always give them the same assignment. You just want to, on the fly, take your pools of existing questions, put that together into a notebook, deliver that to the students. And this is basically the idea here. So we have tasks, which we call them, which are questions or collections of questions which are related to each other. So for example, like binomial distribution 1a, 1b, 1c, right? Then we have a template which defines like the look of the notebook. So you have like some header cells, some footer cells, because when you create an assignment, you always have something like, okay, if you have questions, please post something in this forum. The deadline is this day, and so on. And what we also developed is like some version control for these tasks. So if you change something, it's basically a Git repository in the back end. And we have some nice question templates, but I think it's interesting when I show you how this looks like. So what you see here is basically like the task pool page. So these are all pools which have collections of questions. So this is basically a folder which has many Jupyter notebooks in them. And you can already see, so this is from the German probability theory class. So you have something about Markov, which I think are multiple choice questions. There's like 8 of them in there, and you can see this one is version controlled. And if you click on one of them, for example, this test one, then you see, okay, there is one task in there, which consists of 5 questions, is worth a total of 12 points, and apparently has been modified since the last time someone did something. And yeah, well, now if I would add a new task, what I see or what I'm greeted with is basically this interface, which is a Jupyter notebook. But you can see we have like our custom toolbar with question templates. So we have here like auto-graded code, manual, diagram, free text, multiple choice, single choice, upload files, and apparently someone implemented here a custom reset namespace cell. And if I click now on auto-graded, you can see it prompts you for a name. It already basically recommends a name for you by using the name of this task here and then post-fixing it with a letter, and you can give the number of points, right? And once you do that, it inserts like these 3 cells in here, which already tell you, okay, you have these begin solution and end solution delimiters. You have like this for hidden tests and hidden tests. If you look closer at the IDs, you can also see, okay, right, this is called squares A, this is called squares A description, this is test 0 of squares A. So there is now also some semantics behind these IDs, and it's not just something random. And we haven't made the experience that basically if you don't force people to have these semantics in there, they will just have random cells. And in the end, nobody, at least at our university, understands what this is for, if this is actually like connected to something else. Yes, exactly. And yeah, once you're finished, you would just implement this. And then let's maybe go to a grading component. So, I mean, we also have the form grader. And what we noticed is that people really like to have their paper grading process respected. So what you can see here on the right side is just a normal view via Nbgrader. And you can see there's a little annotation tool on the side. And I annotated this with a very sad smiley face, which you can do, for example, on an iPad very nicely with an Apple Pencil. You just like mark whatever the student did wrong. And this is also reflected later on in the feedback files. So if I give the students the feedbacks, they also see these annotations in there. So just like another modality next to the comment box, which we already have, and of course up here the points. Yes, and what we also did was like a new view for grading. So it's basically, since all the notebooks consist of tasks, it would be very nice to actually just look at one task and just grade all of this for all of the students. So let's say you have like an exam, you have 3 people grading it, and you just say, okay, person A, please do the first task for everyone, person B for the second one. You have a lot more fairness in the grading process, and you don't have like huge notebooks where you need to scroll a lot. Yes. Then what we also have is the examination mode for students, which you can see has again like a toolbar up here, and is like a rather restricted notebook interface. So what students cannot do in here is they cannot delete notebooks, because believe it or not, someone managed to delete their notebook in an exam like 5 minutes before submitting. And then they came, of course, running to us and like, oh, I don't know what happened. Then students cannot modify the structure of the notebook. This is the same as an assignment mode, but it's a little bit stricter in here. So you can, for example, copy nothing, you cannot insert anything, and you have this nice toolbar up here where you can submit immediately from within the notebook. Right? And what you can also see here, I mean, what is a nice feature of Jupyter Notebooks, of course, this is right now just a Java syntax kernel, so that all the cells are shown as Java code, right? And yes, this blue bar basically tells the student, okay, this is a solution cell. So I need to put something in there. And if they're not that familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, you can also have like a little run button here. So they know if I click that, I run the cell, right? Of course, you can use this up here. But now let's assume the student clicks on submit. And what happens then is you basically get like a little pop-up which tells you, okay, this is the time you submitted this. And this is like a hash code over your submission. And the reason behind this is if you have a normal written exam, handwritten exam, you can always prove at any time this is the exam by student A, right? You can do a handwriting analysis. If they say, okay, someone in the end like deleted my question A, or someone wrote something on top of that, and you can say, okay, we do like a nice signature check and a handwritten analysis, and then you can decide. And what we do basically is you get this hash code, and this hash code never changes. So whenever during the grading process you put the notebook again into this hash function, if nothing has changed, the same code comes out. And students basically get a little note with this code and sign that for us. So it's basically, at least according to German law, it is okay. Nobody has ever complained in the last, 10 years. Well, I mean, this hash code has been there since, I would say, 5 years, 4 years. Yes, exactly. And you can probably not see it that well down here, but it says like you can verify your submission here. If you click on that, you get a little HTML version of your submitted exam. So with all your answers in there, so that you can just be extra sure that everything you put in there is actually reflected on the grading side. Because, I mean, probably most of us have taken exams at universities, and you tend to be very nervous, and it's always nice to be able to double check. Yes, exactly. So to summarize this very shortly, what we did is we added new cell types. We introduced this like component-based architecture with these web components, and we have customizable autograders. And thank you for now. But since there's still some time, I can probably even show you the software live somewhere. Yeah, that looks good. Right, this is like one of, let's see if this works, because this is actually online. No, server not running. Then let me see, I think I have one locally running. That looks good. Yes. So basically I can show you the authoring component a little bit. So let's say I have like a new test pool. I want to create a new task. right? Let's call this, I don't know, my cool Jupyter account task. And you can see you have like a little header where you would describe the task in general to the student. You don't need to do that. You can delete that. And then you can, for example, just say, okay, I want to have a diagram in there for the student. So I say this is worth, let's say, 15 points. Click on this and you can see it inserts 2 questions. Well, 2 cells, one is the question, one is the answer. And if I render the answer, you can see there's like this little nice button, edit diagram. And if I click on that, then I get a diagram editor, right? Where I can just put this in there, put something, and it's a little bit hidden because of the screen size. There's a save and exit button here. And if I do that, then the diagram is in here. It's always saved as an image, but kind of the editable diagram is also saved in the same image. So if I click on this again, then I can edit it again. Or for example, we have this nice upload files one, where students could, for example, upload files. So let's render the answer cell again. You can see there's like a little add files images. Click on that. And then let's say I want to take a picture via the webcam. Let's allow this. And I need to scroll down. Wonderful photo. Let's save this in here. Oops. And now it tells the student, okay, you uploaded 1 attachment. Right? And you can do it with other types of files, PDFs, whatever. So you could, for example, in a math exam, you could say they solve everything on a piece of paper, take a little picture, put it in there, and it's right there. And I think this would be a good point in time for questions. So thank you for your attention. Yes, so the question is, does this rely on a JupyterHub? Which is managed by us in the shared file system, or can students, for example, do this locally? So we provide Docker images with which the students can run locally with everything in there. But the problem which we had with courses with like 300, 500 students is, for example, like they install something, the version changes slightly, and suddenly, for example, the random library of Python has now a new little thing where they can sample, I don't know, multiple samples at once, right? And they put that in there. Our environment doesn't have that, and we have to fix everything manually. So I think the good way to do it is via the Docker image, because that they can just have locally. But one nice thing about this managed JupyterHub, which we, by the way, run for rather cheap on like a cloud provider, I think for about €1 per student per month, is that it's fair. So, I mean, I can have the worst laptop ever. As long as I have a browser, I have the same compute resources as someone who is a little bit more fortunate in life, has the newest MacBook. And I think this is also like a bonus for all of this. And we can basically also tell them, okay, you need to implement something efficiently, right? In the real world, you don't have like 32 gigabytes of RAM, so please, we limit that. It's not required, yes. Recommended, yes. Yeah, do we need a shared file system to collect the assignments? Yes. So we have a learning management system. Ours is Elias, and I once created a tool actually called Elias to Nbgrader, which when students upload their stuff to Elias, you can use like this multiple submission download thing. You put it into that tool and it kind of like fixes all the little bugs and puts it into Nbgrader. So that is possible, but it is tedious, right? Because there will always be, 300 students just means you multiply the problems, and depending on our preferred solution is using our own JupyterHub. And there we have a shared file system, yes. Yes, sorry. Yes. 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 Oh, there is. Down here, this is basically the organization. And under the organization, we have tons of things. We have, for example, a little package which makes it easier to write test cases. We have a restricted kernel. But I have to admit, we lag a little bit behind in documentation because we're right now only 3 people who don't necessarily all work full-time on this. But I mean, it's open source, everything, and we would love if someone helps us a little bit and develops this further with us. So it is, so the question is basically where this attachment button comes from. And if we, or for example, I think I have one here, the restricted one. Yeah, or this edit diagram button, for example, where this comes from. If this is tied to Nbgrader or not. So right now it is an NB extension. So I have to admit this does not yet run with JupyterLab because we just didn't have the manpower to convert it. But this is just a JavaScript extension which just opens everything and puts it as an attachment into the cell. So this is completely independent. If you liked, you could basically, or let's say the extra cells are kind of independent of the rest of the software. Yes. Good. Then. Thank you very much. Yeah, done. I think there was one more question. I don't know if we have the time. No, Saturday I'm actually going home. No, I'm sorry. I didn't know that the sprints were on the weekend. But for the next JupyterCon, definitely. Thank you for making me aware. Okay, thank you very much. Then thank you and have a nice day.